And we're live. Good morning from Helsinki. Today is 1st of July, 2020. My name is Kamila Sultanova, and I'm a public speaker and passionate for diversity inclusion. I work with Hanken School of Economics on promoting international students into Finnish job life. These are some of the things I do, but this is my summer webcast, which I started in times of coronavirus to stay useful, valuable, and bring the content out there to anyone who's listening within Finland, to showcase the resilience we need in our communities and get that constructive hope, understanding of that we all can find a place of well-being, equality, and in Helsinki, but broader in Finland. With me today on the 13th episode of my webcast are two interesting and very given doers and community influencers in business community. And I have here Lauri Vaisto and Laura Smith. So good morning, Lauri. Morning, Laura.
Good morning, Camilla. Good morning.
So, Lauri, I take Lauri because you're next in our webcast.
Yeah.
So no pun intended here. Lauri, you're leading strategy advisor services at Duunitori, which is Finland's leading job search and top employer branding agency in Finland. And you do also a lot of video content to promote, to help professionals, companies, HR professionals out there to stay smarter and find appropriate ways to promote companies as employers. And now I want to hear how you do it with inclusion. And Laura, you are from the US. You've been here for 5+?
Yeah, just about 5 years now. Yeah.
Yes, and you and I actually, I met both of you over internet during Corona times, and yeah, this is an amazing way to show we can network, we can build meaningful relations, and with our passion and interest. So any webinar is a platform. But back to you, Laura. You're a communication consultant working on making organizations create better communication strategy, but you also came out with really tactical and interesting tactics for people, for companies to take a meaningful stand in times of Black Lives Matter support, so that we all can learn to be better, so we all can learn to adopt inclusive mindsets, not just in marketing, communication campaigns, but also in daily behaviors. Thank you, Laura and Lauri. So, and I want to say good morning to our audience. We are in Helsinki. I moved here actually 6 years ago. So this is a nice reunion. I moved 30th of June from Denmark, and where I led also a lot of advocacy roles to promote diversity inclusion in Danish job market. And I'm happy that my experiences can now be also useful in the Finnish context, benchmarking and seeing where Finland can actually go faster. But to the audience who are listening to us, this is a webcast where everyone can ask a question. It's not only about us talking about the issues of how business community in Finland can rise to occasion and build and learn to build the resilience towards anti-racism, inclusion, and true equality, which Finland stands for. And please ask your questions, where we will be live for 30+ minutes, but I know when these things get heated, we may get longer, so there's no problem on this. And this is the last webcast before summer break. This will be available on YouTube afterwards. So let's jump through in, and I will start with Lauri and the late Lauri and Laura. Sorry, Lauri and Laura. I need to really be. So I ask every guest speaker on the webcast, how have you gone through coronavirus, and how has it affected you personally and professionally?
Now, look, I said, which one did you say, Lauri or Laura for this one?
Yeah. Okay, I'm also confused. Anyway, yeah, I can go first. I'm here front and center, but to be fair, I'm also the tiniest. So, so that kind of evens it out.
Yeah.
I think when the coronavirus kind of began in mid-March, in a way, there was a lot of uncertainty in the air, and no one really knew what's going to happen, how long it's going to take, how we're going to take care of things, how we're going to take care of the ones we love. And it was a period of great confusion. But then I think it's really about the resilience of the organization, how well you can adapt to like stochastic changes in the environment. And I think for us, our work is very much not dependent on the place where you do it. So remote working was a no-brainer for us at Duunitori. To me, I have a history as an entrepreneur. I've used to working from home. This used to be my office for a while. So in that regard, it was not really dramatic. But of course, it had a great impact on how we work. A good part of our work, for example, is running customer workshops on branding and strategy, and that is something that you can do online remotely, but it can't be done exactly the same as like with post-it notes in the same room.
Facebook, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And Laura?
Yeah, it's actually, you asked this question, I was thinking, so personal and professional, it's been pretty much opposite sides of the spectrum on those things for me. My family's back in the States. So for me, I think it's hit the States a lot harder. And so it's much more of a reality there, having to deal with family who's contracted that and things like this. Those are one thing. But on the professional side, having to make the adjustments in terms of, at this stage in my life right now, I've actually been doing a lot more research in organizational development. So I work with communications, but I look at how exactly companies are connecting the communication of who they are with what they're doing and how they're growing as organizations. So for me, this has been a great chance to be able to see organizations adapt in real time. And as I've been working and talking with different companies, I had maybe like 5 or 6 interviews with different companies, and the first week or two of this, when people started having to really go home, and understanding how they had to adjust and change their communications like this. I mean, they had to do this. Companies that were saying before that, no, I don't think we can adjust. We can't really do everything so remotely. There's people who are complaining about that, saying, hey, it'd be more family friendly people if they could do that. It'd be better for inclusion of people who have disabilities. And, for the longest time, companies were saying, no, we can't do that because it would compromise our culture, compromise how we are and how we work. But seeing in real time how companies had to adjust and say, oh, actually, I guess we can accommodate, we can be more inclusive, we can do these things, and find new ways of working. That was something I loved, to see companies do and respond positively in this troubling time. So for me, it's been, kind of both sides of the coin in that sense.
Thank you. Yeah,
I would actually continue and coming back to the actual topic of this discussion, like diversity and inclusion. I think what we actually saw very clearly was that not everyone is in the same position, and people don't live the same kind of lives when the coronavirus hit. Because for some of us, it was very easy to adapt to working remotely, but obviously there are like big professional groups that you simply cannot. You can't really work remotely, like healthcare professionals, for example. And I think it was even a little bit disturbing how at the very beginning, these kind of privileged groups, they acted as if they were in some kind of zombie apocalypse simulator, or like having fun. Okay, now I'm ordering food online. I'm not going outside. When at the same time you had big groups of people who actually had to go there and didn't really know if it's safe or not.
Well, I think it comes down to people not knowing the realities of other people, and that's always the issue. People never really have this awareness of the other, and so you can live your life thinking that you are and how you are is the way the world is, and and I think this has been a great time. You're right, Laura, to be able to understand. Okay, wow. There are different ways people are working, different ways people are coming together. And we have to acknowledge and be respectful and supportive of the different groups, however they are.
Right. So this showed a lot of vulnerability, and even in Finland also, even though one of the great elements for Finland is known as the IT corner of Europe is that 1 million Finnish people were working remotely, where it was like, what is 59% of Finns working remotely, where if you compare it with the other countries in Europe, Bulgaria, Hungary, Croatia, Greece, Romania, they just almost failed to crack the threshold of 30%. That was the survey from the Eurofund. So on one hand, it's true that there is still a nice that to have a backing, to have the IT infrastructure and the trust. So the best lessons learned for Finnish business community is that there is tech infrastructure and trust. And then what lesson learned now is that because nothing will stay the same, the idea is that people want to have that more self-management. And I think that's also interesting to see how will this fall into self-management role on HR professionals who I deal with every day. How would they be able to make sure to recruit inclusively, to have the freedom to open up their more companies to different talent pools that there is today. But thank you for this. It's nice already we jumped into this. So the context of our discussion is, and I deal with internationals, I deal with people who are underrepresented group voices, and the fact is that this webcast is in English. I want to showcase the Helsinki region as an employer location, but also Finland and whole, that there's so much going on in Finnish, and I think people need to hear about the Finnish company voices, Finnish artists, entrepreneurs, non-profit activists and artists who really deal with community work and community resilience. So when looking at the hard facts, Finnish unemployment, according to Findicator, grew in May to 10.6%, which is hike from 8.8% a year earlier, which is kind of expected that there's so many people are laid off. I think there was a question of 32,000 people were laid off across Finland. And I'm really sorry as well to hear about people in those industries who cannot do remote work, which Laura says, tourism industry suffering. The people from airline industry kind of were offered opportunity to do health work. So kind of also to rise to occasion to help the community of healthcare professionals. Finnair is really driving the talk on being that responsible employer. But also we know from what I spoke to Laura before that as a reputation, Finland doesn't fare as the most inclusive towards people of African descent and minorities. It's one of on EU level, one of the racist countries in the EU, and we need to do some work on figuring out how every player publicly, from education, from community, from business, we can really change that trend so that we all have this hope, and I call it constructive hope. So what we want to talk about is what has been going on, how each of you look at this, and what we can share with our colleagues, with the doers in the field who still need to recruit. And autumn is coming up. There is more to look forward to and see what are the ways to embrace tactics, but also long-term benefits of anti-racism, equality, and inclusion work. And before we start, I want to thank everyone of those who I work with through Hanken International Talent Program. I've reached out to almost 200 companies, CEOs, HR professionals who are listening and are interested in building connections for students and people with ethnic backgrounds alike at their workplaces. I also want to thank influencers, colleagues like yourself, the Inclusive, the NGO that does massive work on promoting knowledge, as well as anti-racist workers, trainers. I work with Equalita. So there's a lot of name dropping, but I think it's really needed to be said that there are a lot of stuff in the background, even though we don't get the airtime on the media. We have actually had time on the media with when anti-racist protests came up here in Helsinki, in Turku, in Tampere. So one of the spokespersons here was Mikaela Mua, working for Ministry of Justice. So we need a lot of allies, and I want to now ask you more specifically how, I'll start with you, Laura, how you came in with this challenge, which you didn't really focus on, and how you actually jumped into the domain, and what is the reaction you're getting with tactics, and please tell about what you've done.
So for me, actually kind of backing up a little bit, I do communications, okay, but I also do organizational research and development.
Exactly.
So for me as a consultant, what I've been able to see in different organizations was that there has been an issue that people have been trying to address. I think the Finnish market and the Finnish ecosystem is eager to try to address problems when they recognize it in general, if they feel that they can do that. So one thing that's happened was when the Black Lives Movement came out in full force here, then people started coming and contacting me and say, hey, what can we do? What's the message we should put out there? What's the way to really kind of make some difference in this sense? And most people were thinking about, okay, what should we do? Should we do the black box situation? Should we, what kind of words should we put out there? My thought was, you need to go beyond words. And that's an important thing to think about. Your output should be more than just a verbal output. It should actually be something that stands for something. So I've been putting out content in terms of some videos, some guest blogs, etc., to help people understand that when it comes to these sort of things, I know your PR agencies, your PR people are definitely pushing to say something. I'm going to push you to do something. Okay. And that's what you talk about. Okay. So that's the thing I really want companies to think about in terms of meaningful stands that they can take. And that's been the primary focus, I would say, for what my input has been in that sense. Organizations here have been looking at different ways they can do that. And I would say, honestly, the most important things would, of course, be to understand, to listen, have some radical empathy, okay? Make sure that people are caring, even when it's inconvenient. Think about what's necessary. Think about, the people that you're working with, people at the community that you're in as well, and building awareness, of course, that translates into action. Thinking about active advocacy, finding different ways for companies to be able to not just say they have, not social media advocacy, slacktivism, as I say.
I like how you said we don't need chance, we want change.
Exactly.
Or another.
So think about active advocacy. I can go into that a little bit later, of course, but then think about the sustained action over time.
Sustained action over time. Yep.
So those would be the three things that I would focus on. And that is where your story and where your communication comes in. You're talking about that. You're holding yourself accountable to this. You're putting this out there. That's where your message comes through. It's not the other way around in that sense.
Right.
But Lauri, feel free to jump in and talk about what you've been doing as well, of course.
Yeah. So Lauri, what have you been doing on this specific topic? We had a few conversations. We also met online. So we haven't met personally, any one of us. So it's a great way to find connections. But tell us what you've been doing through your work.
Yeah. Our work is with the employment market and helping firms find employees and helping employees find employment. So this is kind of our scope of action, and this is like our world. And there are certain things that should be kind of highlighted that can be seen as a problem in the Finnish job market. And one of them is obviously the kind of I'm not sure if it's structural racism or what is it, but obviously sometimes it's more difficult to get employed in Finland if you don't look like a Finn or if your name doesn't sound like a Finn. So that's one thing. And actually, one of the things that we have been doing as a company, I cannot take credit for this myself, but we have been advancing the techniques for anonymous recruitment. So that our customers, the employers who want to hire new employees, they can actually use our ways of working that ensure anonymity in the process. So that's like one of the things that could actually kind of bring down some of the barriers, at least at the first stages. Obviously, at some point you will have to meet face to face with the one you're going to hire, but at least until then, we try to create a fair, even playground.
Okay, and so have you noticed anything that changed since this Black Lives Matter came up, also the discussions in LinkedIn, at least I saw. Have you seen any reaction from your company customers reaching out or?
I would have to say not in a big scale, at least. I think when we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, I think people in general and companies in general, they kind of struggle to understand kind of how this relates to them here in Finland. And I think that's something that still needs a lot of discussion internally in the companies. Kind of what does it mean that this is happening, and why this is happening, and could it happen here? I think this is still an ongoing discussion. In the companies. I really haven't seen much action.
Yeah, that's sadly the fact. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I would say, actually, I agree. A lot of companies are having this thought about how it relates. What I've seen recently, I put out this one series, like the Go Back Better series on YouTube, and a couple other things. Mostly from the videos, people have been kind of getting back to me from the Finnish, business scene, and what they've been saying was that, yeah, I didn't realize the different things that they could do or how it actually impacts them. I think it's just a matter of awareness. The fact is, a lot of people don't understand there is not one Black community in Finland, by the way. You have multiple Black communities.
Right.
You have essentially people who are, of course, African immigrants. That's one group of people who come directly from there. I am from the African diaspora. So my family is from the States, basically. So, and we came over from, from there. So you have people who come in from, the States, from Canada, from, the UK, from Jamaica, places like this that are not from Africa directly. You have people who are actually born and raised here, people who have Finnish heritage. Some of their parents are Finnish or something like this. One of the parents is Finnish or something like this. They grew up being biracial here. You have people who are, second, third, fourth generation. They may not have, ethnic, Finnish heritage, but they've been here for so long. Their family's been here. They are Finnish. You have so many different communities and different experiences, but the fact that people kind of get lumped into this one big foreign category, that's unfortunate. It's unfair as well. So that's a thing when it comes to hiring. People often kind of sometimes don't think about this. People will assume this, assume differences that may or may not necessarily be there. And that's the thing, we're talking about diversity. You got to think about diversity of experiences too. If someone grows up here, it's very different than if someone grows up elsewhere. Think about the different mindsets people are bringing in, different kind of values. And I think people haven't really been thinking oftentimes that the input that a person, sometimes people of color, might bring in has value to them. And that's problematic.
That's right. I just read this tweet of, she's a TEDx speaker, and she said, like, unless you have lived or experienced, this inequality, grief without retribution, you will never understand what inequality feels like. So that we really need the representation of people who really walk the talk. I do a lot of work on promoting dignity, and one of the founders, John Ho Bryan, along with Crown Prince Haakon and Finnish philosopher Pekka Himanen, he says, you will preach what really touches you. If your relatives have cancer, you're going to care about cancer. If if you care about animals or you care about domestic violence, you would care all those things. But then how do you bring that perspective of experiences to recruitment and connect inclusive recruitment towards business, that it makes economic sense? I think this is where we're talking about the role of business. But let me get comments. We have some nice comments going on, and thank you everyone for joining. Zama Ferin says, agree. She said this earlier. Sorry, Zama, I didn't voice that. She said, I was surprised to see that there's one day a week in many companies in Finland where it's okay to work from home, even before Corona. I've never come across that in my working life in India. So yeah, we need to appreciate that trust. There is freedom with responsibility. It's very similar in Denmark, I remember. Raisa, student, she's also started an international student advocacy from Tampere. She says in Brazil, there are policies in place that make it compulsory to have at least minimum amount of people from Black and Indigenous backgrounds employed in public bodies. Do you think that would work in Finland? What would be the obstacles to implementation of this kind of policies? Anyone?
Interesting. Quota systems.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know. Actually, I have not been the person who's been up on necessarily the quota systems per se. They have a lot of value, particularly when you have such deeply entrenched racism and people have this very strong emotional and psychological barriers to really do that, to actually hiring people who are different from them. Here, I'm not certain if that would be the necessary first step. I think that may not be an essential first step in this particular context, in this particular country. But I do think people need transparency. I think that's something that would be valuable. So for instance, if people were reporting and it had to be publicly reported in terms of their diversity for every company, in terms of what the diversity in recruitment, the diversity in terms of onboarding and how the retention, if that had to be something that was actually publicly available, I think there is a strong enough social motivation here that people would feel that they'd have to move the needle on that one. I don't necessarily think mandates would be essential here, but social pressure via transparency could do the trick.
Yeah, and you,
Lauri? Well, to be fair, I haven't really thought about this particular solution to the problem, but in general, I would say as a person, I'm kind of opposed to quotas. However, I have worked around this topic in my head, and when it comes to, for example, gender equality, I kind of see the value of having at least like temporary quotas just to kind of show people that, okay, you can also do this, and okay, here's a female professional in this position. You can also become one day what she's doing. When it comes to like racial quotas, I don't really, I don't know.
Yeah, we spoke about this when I was in Denmark, because my career experience comes from shipping companies, Scandinavian shipping companies, and I was often one of the only ones in my team in sales, and it's interesting that my previous vice president of tanker company, she said, well, it took us 100 years to get to voting rights, but will it take another 100 years for us to become constructive members of the management position, like to be CEO. So she was pro quotas, and I kind of, and I was doing a lot of European women lobby work for women participation in job market. So I was also part of this idea that I do support temporary quotas to really, but also connect the action plans of any institution in public, in politics, in the city, in education and companies, so that like, what's your commitment, and revisit your commitment and see what you can do, instead of saying that we need this percentage and that percentage of ethnic things. So I think the actionable plans and the diversity commitments would definitely walk the talk better in this sense. Another
Come in and comment on that really quickly. You guys convinced me a little bit more, I have to say. I was not originally thinking about the gender side of things when I was making my comment, but you're actually right. I think if you have, obviously over 50% of Finland is female. I think it was a 52, 53%. Yeah. If you have that large a percentage, you do need to start talking about actual representation that you can see numerically, okay? And maybe they could start saying something in terms of introducing other kinds of diversity. You need to have, perhaps if they did something as an introduction, I think. But once again, I think the long-standing thing is going to be more or less changing social norms towards diversity. And if it comes to if the first door opens through, quotas, fine. But I think the biggest thing is going to be, how can you change social norms over time?
That's right. And just while we're on the shipping context, the companies in the blue Denmark is the Association of Shipping companies, they've introduced this gender mainstreaming, and they want to have more women in the sector. And another example in Norway, I know Norway has been particular about women quotas on boards, and they, one of my previous colleagues, he's from Haugesund. He said that the first time in history in that shipping association in that region is a woman, which is like also history in the making, because very many sectors are so conservative and male oriented. So we need to break that idea of the job market, which is gender divided, and all the Nordic countries have shared the same job social fabric comparing to South Europe. So there are great examples, even though there will be naysayers against quotas in any case. So we have three more comments. I'm literally excited that people are commenting on this. So great question, Raisa, said Zama Ferin on the quotas. She said, I once worked at a company, I was the only non-Finn. I remember a conversation where I asked, a casual conversation, where what the HR manager thought about diversity in the company. She immediately said that in terms of expertise, there was a lot of diversity, and that when it comes to hiring, the hire for experience and not for the race. I did not know how to respond to that. So I wonder what Laura, Camilla, and Lauri have to say about this. So it's I think, thank you, Zama, for I think it comes back to this diversity of thought, this, I agree with you. I think that's not necessarily, it's not the constructive answer.
Well, yeah, it was definitely not a constructive answer. Here's something I find, actually, I went to this one company and they were talking about inclusion, and I remember asking them, all right, so how are you doing your recruitment? I said, we actually get like 60% of our people from referrals and word of mouth and this kind of, from referrals. People that are in the company, and you're going from the networks and that kind of thing, because they're going to work out. And they're like, but then that helps us get such a diverse group of people. My thought is, okay, I think a lot of times we're thinking of diversity, we don't really understand how diverse diversity could be. You don't know the thoughts you're missing, you don't know the opinions that you're missing, you don't know the perspectives that you're missing, because yes, everybody is different, everybody's an individual, certainly, and everybody's going to bring something different with them. Right. But you can get even further, you can get even more diversity, more input, if you travel outside of your own bubble, in terms of your professional bubble and your network. So I think a lot of times people don't understand. Yes, you can get different opinions from people in the same town who went to the same school and are best friends or whatever. But you know what? You could probably get something else, a different kind of different from other groups, And I'd like to encourage people to think, okay, yes, you do have some diversity there. Can you get more value by thinking even further?
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. And Lauri?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very interesting topic, and I think it's good to kind of understand that things are not black or white. No pun intended, but more like there are like conflicting ideals when it comes to recruitment. And for example, this word of mouth, hiring through referrals, there is value in that, and it's been demonstrated earlier. But at the same time, I do see the point how it could actually lead to less diverse working group, which also has been demonstrated not to have great value. So I think it's a matter of not kind of finding the perfect formula to follow, but rather kind of monitoring and being transparent and like understanding what's happening. But I think the actual problem here is that very often these kind of discussions are had on the level of the hiring manager or the like recruitment specialist, when these discussions should be had at the very, very high levels of the organization. It should be a C-level discussion. Maybe not every meeting, but consistently. And this is the only way you can actually kind of change bigger organizations, setting precedents and also kind of engaging the top leadership, top management to make a change.
Yeah, I mean, it is top, but also need something, also this buy-in from the bottom, right? So there's like groups have to also adopt it. So it's not like whisk the diversity down.
I think that there's a big difference between how you're going to approach diversity and how you're going to approach inclusion. So I think, honestly, diversity is something that can be talked about and championed by the top level, et cetera. Yeah, but if you're going to talk about how are you going to manage and, get the most from and with the people that you bring in, now you really start talking about, you do need to have the people, your HR, your people ops, you need to have the managers, you need to have every person in your organization on board to understand how to work with the diversity that you have. So that's the inclusion aspect of it. So I think you really have different levels of thinking about that there, and everybody on board.
Yeah. So to summarize the question, answer to Zama Ferin on do you want to be diversity hire, or you do want to be hired based on expertise? Of course, everyone wants to be hired on the level of experience, of merit. But the question is how that HR person or the colleague will make you feel included, especially when you're the only one in the company representing yourself by having your virtue, by being different, virtue by having a different ethnic background. So it's important to recognize the differences, what we mean by diversity. And I take it from a nice description we take from Atomico. They made a huge case study on inclusion in tech, but this is a very generic. So there is demographic diversity is where our differences can be grouped in 3 broad categories. One is demographic, so it's age, race, gender, identity, sexual orientation, physical resources. Second is experiential, what you also spoke in, Laura. It's economic or social position, education, occupation, faith, abilities, dependencies, caring responsibilities. And the last one is cognitive. So that is the diversity of thought, right? How we approach problems and think about things. So this is where we really need to see how is this embodied in the company values, in their way they promote their inclusivity. And it's great that now we see the shift over the 10 years I've been following this debate. I see the shift where inclusion comes ahead of diversity. So this is where you look at the company culture and say, okay, we hired Zama or Camila or Laura. How we make sure that we want to still feel connected and contribute to the difference with being a minority hire in that company. So I hope that answers the question, Zama, but there's a few others.
Can I just continue on that thought a little bit? I really think it's like a really nice thought that you're hiring to expertise, and that's kind of like what you're supposed to say. But whether it's a reality, it's a totally different story. And I would think that in Finland there is like kind of a hidden barrier to this being actually the reality. And that is the language, and I can see quite often that professionals being hired to positions are required to master the Finnish language, when really you could ask the question if it's actually that necessary, especially in areas like IT, when you are doing coding in English anyway. So how do you actually justify that the language that you don't actually use in your everyday work would be like a quality that could like make or break the employment deal?
So thank you for raising that question. I need to continue with this, otherwise we'll never get through it. I want to, sorry, Laura, remember your thoughts. So Raisa agrees with she also wanted to support Zima's question that there are racial barriers and racial obstacles, but it's taboo to talk about racial-based inclusion. I think it perhaps might start with reporting. So yeah, it's back to the commitments we have on company level. Pia Hokalio, she's a great teacher, colleague of mine on Dignity projects. Thank you, Pia. She says, our municipalities are very myopic in their attitudes and hiding behind bureaucratic paragraphs. As teacher, I ran into an Afghan physics teacher who spoke quite good Finnish after 2 years in Finland. However, he was not teaching in school, but taking a basic course in a business college with youngsters half his age. Absurd. Yeah. And then you find people driving Ubers, and you find people working below their professional merits. And I think right now we are in this trouble. This is my second crisis after financial crisis, where everyone is involved. So you cannot discuss the diversity inclusion on like singling out specific group of people because everyone is bleeding. But then still, we need to take that human rights perspective, the equality perspective, and the commitment of Finland to be the leading equality nation in the world. So I think, thank you, Pia, for raising this. I also work on this with how can we aspire young students from secondary school to high school to vocational academies to see that they can have different professional roles in Finnish work life. And a lot of cross-sectoral cooperation is needed. And I think one of the spokesperson from cross-sectoral cooperation is Yasin Sim. She works for Google, and she's also a spokesperson for diversity inclusion. And so I work with NGOs, cities, universities, and companies to bring in this about the change with focus on international students. And there's need much more for that. And Citra Lab is doing these different experimental approaches to break the silos between the sectors, because we're not going to solve it all in one field. Then we have Vladimir Baryshnikov. I missed his comment. Vladimir Baryshnikov says, to help in solving COVID-19 and digital gap growth, I have to invent new societal organization form, optimalism. There's a crisis now in the US about ebooks that became non-available via public libraries. Okay, so I think Vladimir supports some even applied court against internet. Okay, I don't really understand that comment. Sorry, Vladimir. Under optimalism, I mean capitalism for socialism. Okay, Vladimir, we're trying to keep on the conversation on a very pragmatic level. And then here Zama says, very well said, Camila. And on that note, I would like to share a little about my current employer, the city of Espoo. In the city strategy, there is importance given to the statistics that they say there's a fast increase in non-Finnish Swedish-speaking residents in Espoo. I agree with you. And they strive to have the city organization reflect in the demographics of the population, which results in people like myself given a chance to be hired. Not sure if this is the best solution, but it is something, isn't it? Yeah, I think City of Espoo is doing great of participatory approach, and they promoted English-speaking services. So they offer a lot of English, a lot of documents in English and services on their website. It's called like helloespoo.fi. You can visit. And then, okay, and then we have Bambi. Bambi Dang is a volunteer in Global Dignity, board member. We have had a client who specifically stated that they would like us to hire for them a female intern since they want to balance out the gender in their team. Why not?
I have one point here, by the way. I find sometimes when different companies are looking to try to diversify and they're trying to add in people with different roles, et cetera, they often will look to add in women, minorities, marginalized groups, sometimes in the easiest open door, which is like the internships. Okay. It's very hard to scale up in influence, and it's very hard to scale up in authority from that point. So I would say if you want to make a difference, not just in terms of presence, not just a numerical presence of people, but we're talking about actually changing the actual impact people can have, you might want to start thinking about, well, do you have any positions of impact that are a bit higher up that you can add women as well? Or things like this. You don't have to necessarily add people to the bottom, you know, in that sense of your social pyramid. See if you can actually think about what are some meaningful, impactful roles you can add people to that can boost your representation in that sense. But also, once again, create this, you're talking about how can you change this idea about what people think they can aspire to. If people think they can aspire to just being an intern, that's not that inspirational, is it, you know? Give people more opportunities that are more desirable in that sense.
Right. then the question here is, as a person of color, it feels it's tricky. It's a place to be in within a company that has employed you and still want for more people of color while you're not in a decision-making position. How aggressively you bring up these issues of inclusion, diversity? Do you have any thoughts how to approach this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a question of mandate, but representation again, to be an inclusive employer brand. Lauri, how do you recommend companies that if they want to be seen as an employer with a good inclusive employer brand, what can they do?
If they want to be seen as an employer that has a good track record on diversity, they have to be the employer that has has a good track record, and maybe maybe just to kind of give an answer to this question, whether for example the policies of the city of Espoo are the best solution or not. Quite often there are no best solutions, and like in any area of business, when you try to solve a problem, you're usually better off just trying to do something and kind of justify it somehow, and only afterwards you will see whether it was the right choice or not. I think like complacency is always the worst option. So doing nothing is always worse. So if you try this approach, then you at least know if it worked or not, and you can move on to something else.
So more decisiveness in taking tactics and decisive action towards recruitment. Is that what you're saying, Lauri? No complacency, be more decisive and.
Yeah. I think you're summing it up pretty well.
Yeah. Okay. And Sumbu says, thank you for this. If you already brought up the issue of tokenism, I work for quite a big organization in Stockholm that claim to actively work for achieving diversity in the workplace, which they also do, but they never hire a non-white person for higher positions, even when the non-white person has better qualifications. Again, I need to breathe on this one. I'm going to bring this up, but do you have advice on how to bring the issue of diversity, but as well inclusion in our workplace that is half doing its part? Thank you, Sumbu Chantran Temo. Chantran, I hope I said the name right. Yeah. So this is more like ranking. Yeah. Go ahead, Laura.
Honestly, here's the thing. It depends on, firstly, what kind of company structure you have. In some ways, it is easier to work, actually, with different kind of paradigms. So if you are like a structured hierarchical organization, a way that people do is they basically create committees that have oversight over this. And the committees take people from across the organization, this kind of thing. If you are more of a flat organization and you guys are being led from the middle in that sense, you're being led from based off of consensus or whatever kind of program you might have, there are different kind of flat structures you can use. In that sense, you have to start talking about looking at how things are actually getting done, examining your influence, examining essentially how exactly power is in your organization, really breaking that down. And then creating different ways to support that. I found that there are certain things that work in terms of you can address it from the communication side of things. You can address it from having different kind of committees or something like this. But the most important thing is that you have accountability and trackability, okay? And you actually have to define what you mean by inclusion. So if you don't define inclusion, it's really, really hard to say we've missed the mark on this. So that's the most important thing, I would say, getting your clarity together. And then you can start talking about, that helps you define the problem. Then you can start trying to find solutions to address that problem. You have to get your collaborative ownership of that. So you need to have comprehensive ownership across your company at different levels. You need to have people who are impacted by this also in that committee, if at all possible.
Right.
And then from there, you need to test and make certain to see if it goes, track it over time, adjust and pivot. As Lauri was saying, try something. If it doesn't work, learn from it, do better,
But how can you do it as an individual, Laura? The thing, it's if you don't have enough allies in the workplace, that question, and bringing the career potential, that once you're in the company and you want to grow, are you always going to be that specialty or specialist or expert? Do you have any take on that, Lauri?
Or Laura?
Yeah. Did you want to take a thing?
Laura. I felt like Laura was going to say something. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Go ahead, Lauri. Go ahead. Jump in. Go ahead. I want to hear you, Lauri.
No, I don't have like the great word of wisdom for this. It's problematic if the responsibility for change falls on the only person of color individual at the workplace. Then it's a bigger issue, and I don't think. I don't think you probably can't make a big change all by yourself. It's first. It needs something from the organization. Other people need to realize what's going on, and they need to see the value of changing practices.
Actually, just thinking about this, a number of contracts that I've gotten recently have been helping out individuals. So essentially what will happen will be, there'll be individuals who are essentially those marginalized persons. And what they would say is, hey, look, I feel like I'm kind of, in this ghetto in this company, in the sense of this professional ghetto. I can't break out of this bubble, or I'm kind of put in a space, or there'll be something along the lines of they feel they can't move up or something like that. People will say this, but they say that they feel like they're being gaslit to a certain degree because the company doesn't say that. They think of themselves as being incredibly inclusive. I get usually brought in, I've been doing some research for different companies for this kind of reason. And one way that things have been able to change in companies is through building awareness. So sometimes bringing in some external party to look at your actual situation to say, okay, so look, this is the reality people are experiencing here. You may not see this, but this is that more systematic thing. Getting people to actually expose that system, that's something that's been able to make an impact for people. It may not be that you as an individual in there have that voice. What you can do is try to co-opt other voices and try to find some person with an vested interest in allyship. So maybe your HR person, maybe your people ops person, maybe your COO, maybe your CEO. Somebody should have some vested interest in that. It might be your marketing person. Somebody wants to tell a story about you guys being an inclusive company. Get that person to see this from this angle. Sometimes you can use sometimes you can use that data that someone else can bring internally or externally. Sometimes you can say, hey, look, you want to tell this as a story that you want to talk about in the company, depending on what your role is. Some people have been able to be persuasive in that sense. Hey, this is a great, employer brand story, to talk about how we're improving our inclusion. So you can take that, find the people who have some kind of angle towards, interest in allyship, and then try to convert them based off of their own interest.
Maybe if I could just elaborate a little bit. My message was a little bit depressing. I still think that as an individual person and alone, you probably won't be able to do much. But the thing is that you don't have to be alone. And maybe the most practical route is to kind of look out for allies. Maybe it's someone from the HR department. It could be a third party outsider coming to kind of evaluate the workplace, how you work there. So I do agree with Laura that this is probably the most practical way of approaching it.
Yeah, and I also, I promote a lot mentoring, and there's difference between mentoring, coaching, and a sponsor. So one on a language barrier or on this career advancing barrier, very low key practical individual response would be for Sumbu is to find a person who you can trust in the company and ask him or her to say, well, if we are in a conversation at a table and there is a second language or the main language be spoken, ask if you can start speaking English so you're not the one always changing the conversation to English, if it's, Swedish, Finnish, whatever. And the same way would be like, can you help me support my cause at the next employee awareness meeting or something where you do talk, you have a sponsor who talks about you or supports your cause. So, and I've had several of these myself personally, trying to navigate the shipping companies, trying to navigate different environments, in nonprofit sector. So always the other person who unconditionally speaks your cause, so that you're not alone. So thank you, Lauri, for bringing that, saying, no one has to fight this battle alone. So, and now we go to the best part. What can be done? We know that we have national strategy, diversity strategy, which is driven by Business Finland and Ministry of Employment and Economic Affairs. Since 2017, they launched a national strategy called Talent Boost, and I'm part of that ecosystem. I started there as an advocate, design sprints, and a spokesperson. Now I work with Hunk International Talent, and there's like different kinds of hubs across the country. Tampere is doing great things as a city to look out for people of, actually it's internationals, expats, but I think the same what we do has to support the main message of people who are different can have a space in the work market. So tell me, where are examples to Lauri and Laura, which companies are doing great job in Finnish business community? I'll save my examples for later because I want to hear yours and see if we overlap.
All right.
Yeah. Anyone?
Laura, you want to? Okay.
Go on.
All right. Fair enough. All right.
Go ahead.
So actually, I'm going to give a special light on shine a special light on Futurice. That's actually one of my favorite companies here in this ecosystem. What they are doing, they've actually been looking at D&I for a couple of years now, but it's been mostly grassroots internally. The people there have been interested in this in their own angle, in their own point. They've been kind of looking at different ways of approaching this. They've been building tools internally. I like how they built this one tool, Bubble Burster, which basically helps people understand and know expertise within their company, based off of what their output is. So it's not necessarily the most popular people, or people that you might say, hey, they probably look like they know something. You actually look at actual output, and they've been connecting people using that technology. And now they have just recently decided to put into their actual company-wide OKRs on diversity and inclusion. And that's something I am very excited to see when it goes from just being, this general interest in the company to actually being something that people are going to be monitoring and following.
Yeah. You have been breaking out, so can you repeat the sentence, what they decided to do recently? Sorry, just
certainly.
Broke off.
Thank you for letting me know. It's fine. So they actually decided to add in basically D&I into their OKRs, and so that's their objectives and key results. Okay, at the company level, So for them, that's going to be something where they found this tie, this link between inclusion and strategy, because they realize if they're a company that wants to scale, and to grow, they have to have a solid company structure internally in terms of how they're actually engaging people and getting people together in that sense. Diversity, you have to have that input to be able to understand the markets you're going into, of course. Yes. They understood that link. They added it to the higher level objectives and key results, which means now they're going to be monitoring this and tracking this over time. Whereas before it was kind of like, we're doing these great things kind of here and there. But when it's somebody's responsibility and when it's the company's objectives, that pushes it even further. So I'm excited to see what they're going to do with that. Another company, very quickly, and then I'll pass the mic. I'm interested to see what Inclusive does. So Inclusive is actually an advocate for inclusion. And we've had some talks recently about how they themselves need to work on their diversity and inclusion in their own company. And that's kind of thing where I would want to see companies like that who are very active about, saying, hey, we are looking to, support inclusion in companies and diversity in companies. I want to see them drink their own Kool-Aid. I want to see them actually, doing that themselves too. And I want to see those kind of companies be able to track their journey once again and share that transparently, because when companies are not afraid of showing basically the humble place they're beginning, the imperfect place they're beginning, that enables other people to be able to learn from their growth. And so that normalized growth.
So you see that Inclusive is not diverse enough?
They have ways to grow. I mean, like in that sense, I might hold them to a higher standard, perhaps because of their mission. But yeah, they could definitely grow with different kinds of inclusion there, certainly as well. So, and I think that's something that they can do, and I think they have an interest in doing so, and that's something I want to make certain they do actually kind of grow in that direction. So, yeah.
Thank you for examples. And Inclusive is holding really interesting talks, interviewing diverse inclusion professionals and business leaders as well on very similar topics that you're discussing now. So I do want to also recommend you go check them out. Yeah, Lauri, your examples of who's doing right thing.
Yeah. I kind of started smiling internally when you Laura mentioned Futurize. They are indeed a good example, but to go even beyond that, I would say the entire IT sector in Finland is doing a great job in general. And I think there is a big lesson to be learned from there. I mean, if you ask why this is, the reason behind that is that there is the war for talent, and they really need to find the best people they can to do the jobs and kind of fulfill the strategic intent. And obviously, there is a business case for diversity and inclusion since they are doing this. And this is something that other sectors should maybe bear in mind as well and learn from this. Maybe from within the IT sector, I would like to highlight a Tampere-based coding firm called Codio. They have this policy of having all their salaries transparent.
Okay.
So everyone knows what the other one is earning, and this is not just for the kind of diversity in the terms of people of color, but also you can check whether people of certain gender or preferences, if there is a difference when you have this sort of transparency. So I think that's a good thing that you could actually learn from here.
Okay.
Also, when we talk about the IT sector, we actually don't talk about a very big group of people, and it's still not a big portion of the Finnish economy in total. So I would also like to highlight big employers of people of color like Palmia, Lindström, these kind of employers where the skill level of the employees is maybe not always the highest, but I know that they have very good practices of including the workers not only in the workplace but in the Finnish society in general. Okay. So I think there is also value in that.
So Palmi and Lindström,
for example.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I have my examples from also Finnish companies. The Futurize was one of them, and Heidi Peck, she's very active also on LinkedIn. So it's all the idea is also in Finland. Maybe many companies are doing inclusive recruitment, but it's also need to share that story. So we, as in our field of diversity inclusion trainers and spokespersons, we need to highlight that there are people who are doing things right. There are many companies. And seeing is believing. That's my slogan I'm everywhere, to breaking the corridors of who can be employed. And so my examples is, one of them is Vadin. It's a software app company from Turku. I had the pleasure to share a stage. It was in 2018 Talent Boost Summit in Tampere that took place. And she spoke how they care about the company and how they make company inclusive as an employer. I think there are 130 people, by the way. So they include by having the values which can be lived by everyone. And I want to read out those values because I think they're really nice and written. They design, no fluff, we say things as they are, transparency, we make information available, equality, and approachability. Everybody is worth my time. And when looking at retention, so this is in recruitment, right, as an employer brand. But on the retention side, they say we take care of all expats, spouses, and we include them in the community life outside working life. And I think this is brilliant. I was like, yes, I want everyone to know about Vaden OU. So they're doing great things, and she's really approachable. The lady, her name was really difficult. The other company who is doing great things is Nava. They are into maritime engineering and IT, and the lady there, the equipment, the experience I shared was that the HR professionals should be self-governed function, not a support function, which unfortunately we see a lot of times. And I want to speak on behalf of HR professionals who do break the mold and do recruit and have the ability to speak their mandate, because it's still, regardless of in the war for talent that Laura says, it's still going to be employees market at the end of the day. The future workforce, they want to work for purpose-driven companies, and where the IT function and the HR function will be not support, but the actual functions that shape the company's culture. So that she really highlighted on the HR profession and the mandate that they have to really walk the talk, the debate. And the third one is Sievo. Sievo is also IT company, and I didn't mean to bring in the IT companies only, but it's just what comes out with our circle, the low-hanging fruits from we can learn. And they're not big like Pepsi or UPM or Wärtsilä, who have functions set up. So the Sievo is also interesting because he was the VP for engineering, Marcos. He was talking. He's like, well, we get shit done and party after. It was so also very much open on the values, and they want to create that space where really they minimize confusion, or that space, the companies that it's not just coders, but it's people. It's really simple. They talk about simplicity a lot, and I love the Finnish brutal honesty. And how could we do that? Bring that brutal honesty into talking diversity inclusion. And 2 years ago, when I was speaking, I talked about how Finland has the size and the right mindset and the human capital to be the champion of inclusion. I know it sounds crazy, but it's realistic. Crazy in terms of being against all odds of surveys, but that there is such human capital, there is that trust that is given because of the system, because of education that there is, but there still needs to be that we have a big heart, we need to open it, right? That how to open up instead of turning in, and we have this COVID uncertainty coming in. So there needs to be this awareness of how we hire for culture fit or cultural add, the understanding of equality, of understanding of higher goals, of sustainable development goals, but also just connecting that what Laura said, leading innovatively is leading inclusively. What Futurize did, right, is setting an example to make, like IBM did. IBM was a champion of diversity, to put diversity inside their business strategy. So that's Futurize is now replicating what to 2020, and it's great. We need to keep on re-engineering that. And diversity management comes from the US in 1960s, right? It's American discipline. And we have now 30-year discipline of coming in as a new is intersectionality, which is not going to be part of this debate, but norm critical approach, intersectionality is already becoming an interesting discussion on the government side. And one of the books I want to show, which you can start early thinking, is Create Space in Education Sector. It's written by Equalita diversity trainers and researchers, and it's for free. And even though it's in Swedish, there is a small book in Finnish. Create Place is how to create this understanding, shared understanding of, in secondary schools, because we need cultural sensitization there as well. But I find that interesting books and tactics also useful for companies. It's so nicely written, amazing mecca. So you can get it for free. Equalita, right there, you'll get the book. It's amazing. It's funded by foundation. So foundation of Britta Maria Renlund, that was helped make this norm critical approach to how we create inclusive schools. And I hope this is inspiration how we can build inclusive workplace cultures. Yeah. What else would you like to add? I know we're going off the time. What are the other things that you hope for happens in the coming fall for our colleagues, for the industry, where business community can really come and build that resilience of anti-racist practices and inclusion?
Maybe I could actually build on something that I mentioned earlier, or at the very beginning of the discussion.
Okay.
And when we talked about the deeds that we've done at our own workplaces, I mentioned the anonymous recruitment facilitation in a way. And I would maybe like to go a little bit deeper in that, since we are now, it is in action, and when we are rolling it out and making this as an offer to our customers to benefit from. It really isn't just anonymous recruitment, because anonymous you can get simply by using scissors and cutting off the name and photo from the CV. What we are doing is we are completely redesigning the recruitment process. So instead of sending a CV and application letter, you would actually, as a recruiter, first decide what skills are needed, what is necessary, and then you kind of build the entire process around them. And then you ask the applicants to kind of answer the questions that you have predetermined in your mind, to kind of best bring out the answers that you want to get, to help you make an informed decision. So that's one of the things. I think it's not just about anonymity. It's about the complete redesign of how we seek employment and how we offer employment to other people. Anonymity is just kind of a byproduct that is a fortunate byproduct there.
So what does it say to people right now listening who want to apply for a job? So what should they expect in, like, do they need to change their keywords if they're going to be part of anonymous recruitment? How does it change the behavior of looking for a job now and after COVID?
I don't think it's about changing keywords. It's about being open and honest about what you're expecting and what you have to offer, and then expect that this is going to be enough, and you will be actually judged by your expertise and not by your skin color.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just a moment. I wanted to say to anyone who's listening, please write in a short moment, what does diversity inclusion mean to you? And just drop a comment. It will be nice to hear, because this webinars will be shared to business community, and I want to kind of get a nice picture shot of conversation and context we have right now. And it doesn't matter where you're from. I do assume we are sending in a Finnish context, but it could be that we have listeners from Sweden. And please write what diversity inclusion means to you, and is this topic relevant for your current situation? Thank you. Laura, now to you.
Yeah, actually, my thought about what I want the business community to take from this.
Yeah.
I have been listening to different companies lately, and my thought is I want them to rethink how they're positioning D&I in their organization. I want them to have a different perspective towards it. There's a strategy side of things, of course, and there's also people thinking of it from a PR side of things. There's a marketing side of things. Right now in this post-COVID world, budgets are getting really tight, and companies are thinking, all right, we're going to cut down all the non-essential things. We're going to cut down all the funding and the issues and the time, and we're going to actually invest in things that are just kind of the fluffy stuff.
Right.
And they sometimes group D&I into the fluffy stuff. They think about that as one of the non-essentials. And I would really want companies right now to understand that this is exactly the time that you need this more than ever. Especially when we're talking about inclusion in particular, I want you to understand that when you have limited resources at this point, your financial resources, maybe personnel resources contracting a bit, you need to make certain everybody is as engaged and plugged in and as utilized as possible. This is exactly the time when you really need to make certain that everybody is as included as they possibly can be, okay? You need to make certain that if your goals are you're trying to grow, if you're trying to scale, if you're trying to build some new products, that you are going to increase your chances of success with those by having a diverse workforce. You want to make certain that your strategy is enabled by your people practices and your D&I. And I think that's something organizations need to understand. It's not a thing that is an addition. It's something that's core and central to how you are as an organization. And at this point, you cannot afford to be a crippled organization. You can't afford to be a company that hasn't thought through your people practices, that hasn't thought through these things. You have to be more intentional. And this is something I want you to think about with your inclusion. Think about intentionality, okay? Think about what exactly are you planning through, thinking through, how are you involving people in those plans? Because you got to make it work now. More than ever, it has to work out. And D&I is a great way to make it do so.
Very sobering call for action, Laura. Thank you for that. I know I mean, there are things you can do now. I mean, soon and already now people are on vacation, but also coming in the fall, we still will need to think, how are we going to recruit? It's going to continue. Not everyone is fit in this. And there are those, people, 1 million people on remote, they're probably working for companies who will still need to shape up the work for inclusivity and retention, because retention is money. So let me bring you some money elements from our discussion here. It's not about human rights and anti-racism. Yes, it's the right thing, but also it's about business, it's about growth, it's about new products and services. So Hofstede Insights, my good colleague there, Egbert Schramm, he says, to hire an onboard an employee in Finland costs to 30,000 euro. To lose that same person, so meaning that failed retention, is about 100 to 150,000 euro. So think about why the company culture needs to be built, and having that nice incremental strategic intent where we want to stay inclusive, where we just take care of each other. We're just good. We want to have a good life with people with normal hobbies, belonging, and say, yes, we have egalitarian approach. So how can we make it real, right? So for me, I would suggest, and I agree with Lauri and Laura 100% on your suggestions. My short and long-term suggestions to this post-COVID is, one thing is you can think of, if you don't have the budget, I know that everything is frozen. I've had multiple discussions, watched multiple webinars with recruitment companies, with business companies, with our university collaborators, that talent recruitment has stopped once is COVID, but also because there is recruitment freeze. So the cheap way, but long-term way to foster diverse inclusion is to look through your directory of various talent networks in the area. It's NGOs, nonprofits, it's talent networks with minority backgrounds. We have thousands of them, and talk to me. It's a product placement, but I know them all, and I will connect you to those who, so you can tap into the pool. And I run one of these talent pools at Hunkin. Those are students with accounting, marketing, sustainability, digitalization skills. They can do and pivot your business and be a window of opportunity for your business, right? So those mentoring, that talent networks, and committing to some of the NGOs that speak your company's cause or speak your company customers' cause, right? And I think Laura, you also wrote something that in your call for action. I even talked about it in TED Talk, why we need volunteering, corporate volunteering, mentoring engagements to bring this social capital together. Then commit some budget. It's not just on the long term. It's not just about 5,000 to 20,000 euro of small trainings. It's not going to be a microwaving people to be inclusive. It takes time, and it takes beautiful efforts. But those efforts can be fun, engaging, and as also, I'm working with employee engagement. I say, when people are feeling good about themselves and about each other, they're going to get through so much more uncertainty and be much more resistant. So I'm now planning new approaches with a theater group to bring in this artistic touch of diversity inclusion. So it doesn't feel that difficult. It doesn't feel that heavy subject, feminism, racism, people of, there's kind of turns into like reconciliation training. And so ultimately, there are a lot of trainers, diversity trainers, inclusion trainers, to do an audit for you, for the companies involved. You don't need to boost your employer budgets with $100 million, as many companies in the US do. $50 million like Microsoft, 10 million like Facebook, 10 million like PepsiCo. Or was it PepsiCo had a lot more money putting in. But I mean, shouldn't take the American examples, but we have the Finnish side. So mentoring and corporate volunteering is great to really build up the long-term acceptance of what is means to be, who can drive innovation and growth agenda in your company, anyone. So, and on the other hand, is to be committing in your company strategy to have a community involvement. I do believe community involvement brings in those deep-seated issues to life, and you will get much more loyal and much more retention in your company when your employees are able to be part of something bigger. Be it school students, be it college students and vocational academies, or Hanken in universities. There are a lot of people and youth works and civic organizations to tap into. So on that note, I want to read in a few other topics here. What is diversity to others? Bambi says, diversity for me is a balance of representation of groups of people based on different aspects. Inclusion is to make sure that these different people are encouraged to represent who they are, what they are, and be respected and appreciated. Thank you, Bambi. And I see diversity inclusion as an asset to companies' active goals to strive towards, and not just chants or words. Sounds familiar, Laura? Yes. I will read it out later. I want just to say we need to finish this, so you can go back to your work, and if any other encouragements you have to people who are looking for jobs and to business community, how would, if it was you sitting on a decision-making tool, how would you make sure that there is connection and that community awareness between linking the employees of different ethnic backgrounds to the Finnish employers who are usually willing to help?
Should I go first?
Yes, Laura.
Yeah, I think first of all, like you mentioned all these like big global conglomerates doing grand gestures and pouring in millions of dollars. One thing to kind of keep in mind is the scope of things. And for example, the Finnish economy, Finnish job market, it's not the size of the United States. It's the size of Wisconsin.
Exactly.
And so kind of always keep in mind that you probably won't find grand gestures like that in Helsinki or Vantaa, not to mention Kempele or something.
I found her maybe in Europe.
Yeah. That is correct. That is correct. But as a word of encouragement, I also agree with you, Camilla. Finnish employers most likely are there to do good, and I believe they all have good intentions. Maybe not everyone is seeing everything that is relevant and should be taken into consideration when making business decisions. So just keeping up the openness, transparency.
Yeah.
Keep discussing these issues. It will make a good way forward.
Right. Thank you. Dialogue, very powerful.
Yeah.
Laura?
To piggyback from that, about the openness and transparency, I'm going to talk about two different things. I want to say one thing is, I think that's some big thing for the companies themselves, openness, transparency, but being willing to be humble with where you are to begin with. I think it's a big thing. Finland, once again, can't own this narrative to say, hey, look, we have an issue, we have a problem, but we're willing to fix it. They're willing to grow and learn. They talk about their education system. They talk about, their startup ecology. I think it's fantastic. They have a great ecosystem for that too. But I want to make certain that they can think about this as another branch of that. And it just takes the ability and the willingness to show and, to showcase growth. And I think that's a big thing. That means being able to track things over time. Right. On the other side, I want to talk about professionals and openness and transparency in that sense as well. If you are a person of color, if you are a minority of some sort or marginalized group, and you happen to have been able to navigate the system to be in a great position, I think it's a great opportunity for you to be able to be more visible right now. because
Yeah.
I think that can help subvert the narratives that these people are not necessarily fit for those roles, or, you know, in those roles. I think people recruit more for what they're comfortable for sometimes. I think people do go for comfort over competence quite a bit here, in this particular market, but just in general. You can help shape what people are comfortable with by giving more exposure of yourself or your talents. Personally, I'm not the person who likes to kind of be all the way out there all the time. But there are lots of professionals who are doing that and who are more visible at this point now, because they realize if people think that they can't occupy those spaces, they have to subvert that narrative. And that's a great thing to do, that if you are in that space, then, you know, it's a great time to show your face and show your confidence. So that way it helps open the door for people beyond you. And that's an important thing. Make certain we're holding the door open for folks, other groups, other marginalized groups as well,
Right.
to say, hey, look, you don't have to be the norm to fit into the space. You can change and make an impact no matter who you are.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you both. And for this market, the job market in Finland, which is, you know, shortcut the lab community for startup ecosystem for internationals and people who are Finnish ethnic Finns, non-ethnic Finns, is, you know, 80% of the jobs are filled through referral networks, and where diversity inclusion work is to actually open up the social capital so it's enjoyed by everyone, and that we do speak up, we do promote and share a story, be visible on LinkedIn, promote your online professional presence, do follow your trends, and that's why you also are there to be noticed by your employees, by possible employers. And so luckily I want to, we can continue this discussion, and I will stay here. I will let you go because there are some other comments, but I'm happy that we met now before the summer break. We can sink in a lot of things, and thank you for your suggestions. I learned also from you. And yeah, let's continue and have the dialogue open, because I think right now dialogue about these issues means growth for us and for Finnish economy. And that would be this inclusive recovery for all of us. So thank you all. And I will take a little selfie. I'll take a little selfie and come out here. Great. Super. But I'll come in later on the comments. So we will end the broadcast here. Rising Unity will be back in August, and I wish you a great summer, safe summer, keep safe. Coronavirus is not over yet, and I wish you also, Laura and Lauri, to be bold with your work and to shape more conversations which will take us forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice meeting you both.
Cheers.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you everyone for your comments. I will comment later in a written form. Thanks.